Boy, do Rich and I have a treat for you all today. Being physically fit and financially fit are more closely linked than people realize. Today we sit down with a good friend and early mentor to Rich and I, Bill Pienias. Bill Pienias has been a leader in the insurance and investment industry for over 25 years and has built and led companies in the US and Europe, most notably being the president of AEGON's largest broker-dealer. Rich and I first met Bill in our first couple of years out of college and spent a lot of time learning under his leadership. In our conversation today, we talk about business, entrepreneurship, leadership, and life. Bill provides some incredible wisdom of his learnings and some of his new insights about his company, FinFit Life, where they help individuals achieve strong health, wealth, and the lifestyle to enjoy them. We hope you enjoy this episode as much as Rich and I did. Bill, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Podcast. Rich and I are really excited to have you with us. I was thinking about this conversation today and the fact that when Rich and I really started forming our initial relationship, you were at the middle of that. We were forming a relationship with you as well, early in our careers, and you were a big mentor to us in a lot of different ways. So having you on today and learning a little bit more about FinFit and what you're doing, just really excited. So can you please tell our audience maybe a little bit about your background and what you've done entrepreneurially over the years and where you're at today?
Sure. Um, there's a lot to unpack there, and to do it just briefly, before I get started, first off, thank you for having me on. Rich, great to see you again. It's been some time. We just were talking about
Great to see you.
the length of that time, and John, always good to reconnect. And I've been I guess called a spectator of your life through Facebook. So again, really appreciate being part of this. I guess my story is actually pretty simple, but there's basically, I'll call it 5 parts to my story, and it's very interesting. I grew up in the south side of Chicago, so my dad's a plumber, mom's a clerical worker. So I learned what an honest day's pay for an honest day's work was. And the other part is I was a football player. I was an athlete, so I like to compete. I wanted to win. When I graduated college, I actually went into coaching because I really believed that I could use the game of football to teach boys to be men and men to be leaders by using the game of football. And ironically, as I got into coaching football, and then I met the woman of my dreams, who I've now been married 25 years with, and we've had 3 beautiful children. You know Marianne, and I know Rich knows my oldest son pretty well. There's probably some stories there that he could share later. My son Mitchell. But what's interesting is that in the process of getting married, it caused me to search for a few things that shaped my life. And one of them was, I went to my father and I said, "Hey, do you have any advice for me? I'm going to be getting married. What would you tell a guy like me getting married?" And the first thing and only thing he said was, "You better start saving money, because if you don't, you're going to be broke just like me." And then the next statement that he said was, "Good luck." And I'm like, "Well, who do I talk to? Where do I go?" And he said, "You're smart enough. Go figure it out." And that one, bit of advice changed my life, because I got introduced to a person who you know well, Jeff, and he shared with me one of my high school, one of my best friends growing up in high school, and ironically, as he's teaching me about finance and how insurance works and how investments work, he made a statement that said, if you were to save $250 into this one insurance investment product for the next 40 years, you could be a tax-free millionaire. And I remember that was the first time that my name and millionaire actually were in the same sentence. I thought, if that's true, everyone that I know needs to hear this. And as I started to do my diligence, I realized that there were investment products and services out there that people like me needed, and that totally changed my life. And that's my story. I got into being an entrepreneur by accident. Had no desire to own a business, had no desire to be an insurance person or an investment person. I just wanted to be a coach. And I realized that now my life on the back end is I'm a business coach and I'm a financial coach. And I help people make their way through life, helping them make professional decisions and personal decisions the best I can to help them become the people that they're designed to be. So that's a little bit of my story.
Yeah, that's awesome. And certainly a lot of people, when you think about the current pandemic we just went through and people recalibrating, being financially fit is incredibly important. Can you tell us a little bit about your current company and what that company does and how you guys help individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. It actually happened by mistake, so to speak. I just been with my 3rd company that we had built it from basically very little to becoming a multi-billion-dollar company. It was sold to another broker dealer. And they asked me if I wanted to be part of that. And I said, I don't know if I want to be back part of a big corporation. I wanted to stay on the entrepreneurial side. And I'll talk more about that as if we have this discussion. What was interesting is as I was writing, I've only had in my life a few times to what I call restart. And this was one of those times that I could restart. So I took a blank piece of paper and I started to write down, what did I really want in life? What would be a dream business or dream position? And what does that mean to my family? What does that mean to me? And what does that mean to the people that I wanted to serve? And as I was writing out that job description, I got invited to a conversation with a guy named Howard Sharfman. And he's actually the 1% of 1% in the insurance business. And I remember him saying, hey, listen, I've got this idea. And just so you know, I've lost 100 pounds by using this product because it teaches you about financial fitness and physical fitness. And he said, it changed my life. And the second part is I've learned that there's something to recruiting and building and working in the middle class that I never do because I work in the uber wealthy. So I'm coming to you because you've been highly recommended that you know how to do all of this stuff. And let's have a conversation. And FinFit Life, real quickly, is financial fitness, physical fitness, and a lifestyle to enjoy it. Everything that we do is in our name. And what really attracted me to the concept, the product providers, and the leadership were three things. The first one was most of the people that are in financial services, they talk about wellness, they talk about physical fitness and health, but the reality is marketing. It's just talk. And they might give you some education and some sound bites on nutrition and physical fitness, but there's nothing to truly incentivize those small behavior changes that make a lasting effect in your life. And this was the first time that I saw that it put real teeth to it. So for example, it's like a frequent flyer mile program for your health. As you do certain things, you get points. As you get points, you get more benefits. And as you get higher status, you get lower insurance costs. It's real money. And when you're not spending money and you now have more money in your pocket, you have more money to do the things that you want to do. And that might be saving, that might be vacations, that might even just be, heck, I don't have to get that second job. I can stay doing what I'm doing now. And that was the first one. The second was the ability for us to use our system. We have a business system. It's called our business blueprint. And that system basically helps use two things. One, build off relationships. And the second is to work into new marketplaces through networking. And by doing that, whenever you're in networking, it's interesting, you meet some of the most unique people in the world. But I know in the old business models, if you're only talking to middle class, you have a very difficult time doing the complicated, more sophisticated cases. And that's because of two reasons. You don't have the expertise or you don't have the experience. Yeah. And with Howard and my other partner, John Irvin, we did. And the third part was there was now ownership that was going to be shared with every single person that helps build the organization, knowing that we had the money, the experience, and we also had the influence to get into these markets. That's what created FinFit Life. So again, FinFit Life is focused on helping people become financially fit using insurance and investment products, becoming physically fit by partnering with a company called Vitality, which is a South African company, and they're one of the top health data companies in the world. And they're in 24, 25 different countries. And then the last part is the lifestyle to enjoy it, is that you can be active in using our products and services. We have a community called our Fitness Challenge. Yep. To bring you in. But if you wanted to earn some extra money and help other people on a part-time or spare time basis, you could. And if you wanted to be a business builder, you can do that too. So it gives people flexibility in the lifestyle in which they want to live their life. That's what
I got to say, I am so excited for you because I picture a Venn diagram. And the three circles of the Venn diagram that I know about you and your life is having a passion on the financial side and really helping families. And then you, having been a former quarterback of an Ivy League school at Brown, obviously physical and being fit has been part of your life for a very long time. And then for you to do it, you had said you wanted to stay on the entrepreneurial side and how important that is in terms of lifestyle for you. And I could hear it in your voice. And I just want you to know I'm so excited for you that you've got this Venn diagram. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure you've had that before in your other entrepreneurial ventures where the business itself allowed for you to be able to focus on in the business and the money-making opportunity, financial, physical, and entrepreneurialism, all three. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you might have one if you're lucky. You might be even, God send that you have two, but I've never had all three. And that's, if you can tell in my smile and in the passion and cadence of my voice, I'm absolutely ecstatic.
That's awesome. I was looking at your LinkedIn and I noticed that you've changed opportunities and businesses you've been working in, predominantly as a CEO or a president, about every 3 years or so. A theory that I've noticed is high performers do look for a new challenge about every 3 to 5 years or so. And it looks like you've done that across your career. You've looked for a new challenge about every 3 years or so. I'd love to tap into, you're clearly a high performer. What are the attributes of a high performer that you've seen in entrepreneurs or that you've developed to embody yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first off, thank you. You're always observant. And that's one of the key things that I've learned, especially in this gig economy, that the question usually is, if you're not being promoted in 3 to 5 years, the question isn't like, oh, you're loyal to the company. They look at it as something's wrong with you. Something's wrong with you. So that's the first thing all entrepreneurs need to know, is that challenges change typically, and I mean big challenges in the business, every 3 to 5 years. So you have to look for new ways to either recreate the business or recreate the solutions, because the old solutions don't cure the new problems. If I can, I'll unpack two things that you brought up. And the first one is, I had the very distinct privilege of having been in a solopreneur, which means that you actually own your own job and own business. Yep. And I wanted to learn big business. So when we knew each other, I basically sold my business and moved into a large company called AEGON. And I got the opportunity soon after being employed by them to become what's called an entrepreneur, which I think you guys reference in a lot of your things about being an entrepreneur, where you own the culture, strategy, and mission of the company, but you don't necessarily own the business. And I had the opportunity to do that literally 3 times inside AEGON. And then the entrepreneur part is when you own it. It's yours. You own the systems, you own the development, you own the creation, and you're also the CEO and the janitor all at the same time. Yeah. So that's what I call the entrepreneur piece. And what's interesting is, if I can, there's 3 real key pieces in my life that changed the dynamics of who I am today. And, Rich, you and I, we've known each other a long time, but if you were to take a snapshot of me in 2002 and take a snapshot of me today, the world is completely different. And in my world, and how I look at things and how I act in my behaviors, some of the principles in my directives may not have changed, but my behaviors, my thought process, my mentality has definitely changed. And I want to share 2 things with you on that part. One is, biggest influences in my life. When I joined AEGON, I was mentored by a guy named Pat Baird and Tim Stonehocker. And they mentioned a couple things, and I'm going to hit on 2 main parts for the entrepreneurs that are on this broadcast. The first one is, they said, don't be in a hurry to get to where you want to go, because when you start to skip stones, you create gaps in your life. And sometimes you're so in a hurry to become a CEO, but you forget about all the things that it takes to be a very sound business person. So they said, and the second one was to learn the language of business. And if I can, let me outline these 6 major areas of business that I think are important. It's operations, administration, legal, finance, marketing, sales, and I'll also add technology. And each one of those areas has a language. Now, you don't have to know and master all of them, but you do need to learn how to speak those languages. And I remember sitting in my very first board meeting when they were talking about finance. And I wasn't a big, CPA type financial person, but I learned the language of finance. So then when I could actually speak to somebody, I understood what they were saying to me. It wasn't that I knew how to solve the problem, but I at least understood how they were framing it. Same thing with operations or legal or even technology. I would tell you, I'm not an expert in all of them, but that was the one thing I learned as an entrepreneur, is to learn to speak the language of those disciplines. And I was able to eliminate gaps as I became the CEO of a company, or even CEO of my life, that how I could communicate that to people. And by the way, I'm going to take it from a personal perspective. The CEO of your life also means, how do you communicate to your spouse? How do you communicate to your children? Those are the same principles in which I've just described in business. My kid's a gamer, so I have to learn how to speak gaming. And
there
that's
we go.
a whole other language,
Yeah. I love that, learning to speak the language of the business. And you outlined this 6 things. Can you speak to the overlay of the language of leadership and how that intersects with those 6 things in the language of business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been studying leadership for a long time. And if I can just give you the basics of what I think are the 3 most important pieces of leadership and then how they overlay in this. The 3 major pieces of leadership is communication. And I'm going to dive into that for a second. Some people say, oh, it's just the way, you're a good speaker. But no, communication is planting seeds. It's not throwing seeds. It's planting seeds. It's being able to take the idea that you have and actually properly place it in the hearts, minds, and souls of people. It's to be able to communicate what that means and how does it feel. The second is to be an example. Most people think they have to lead from the front, but the reality is lead where you're at. You can master your craft. And when people start to look at you, which by the way, they're always watching you. Sometimes they'll discount you based on what they see, but they're watching you. And if you can be an example of success, of hard work, of details to master your craft, that's part of leadership. The third one, which is the highest level and the hardest one to do, is connectivity. And it's to connect people to people, to connect strategies to action, to connect results to purpose. It's those are the hardest things of leadership, but those 3 main things are key to leadership. And what the overlay of those 3 things into each of those areas is to eliminate the ego and start opening your mind to understand first, so that those 3 principles can actually bear fruit in the business, enterprise, or relationship that you have.
Well,
does that make sense?
I think we need a whole episode on those 3.
Yeah.
And Rich, I love the question you asked that kind of got us all the way over to this. And very, very quickly, right? Like the keys to leadership that you've learned, because you have studied leadership a lot. I've learned a lot of my leadership lessons from you 20 plus years ago, right? And how you were studying it. And the recap, it's communication, example, and connectivity. And you gave some really good examples there, but I think we need to maybe take a second and go a little bit deeper into like how, like as an example, right? Communication, you said planting, not throwing seeds. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so strong. I can remember so many times I'm trying to throw seeds when I should have just been planting them slowly over time. And one of the biggest things you heard from one of your mentors was don't be in a hurry. Well, when you're in a hurry, you throw your seeds, right? You're trying to throw them and you're ditching them. Can you give us for each of those examples, both communication example, leading by example, and connectivity? If you're an entrepreneur listening to this, how can you put that into practice? What is an example of planting, not throwing, or leading where you're at versus leading from the front? Things like that.
Yeah, so I'll start off with the communication piece. Sometimes as entrepreneurs, you have this great idea and you don't have any sounding board. This great idea is you're like, I'm just going to do it. And if they follow me, great. If they don't, forget them. And the reality is communication is, how do you communicate that idea to get feedback and then buy-in? And that's the first real main piece to this. But I'll give you an example. We were driving in a strategy here in our company, and I had made a comment to a person who sits, right across the office next to me, and started to describe that strategy. And then I had to ask and say, what did you think of that? And the part of the communication of planting the seeds is once you understand how they received it, you now can make the adjustment on how to give it back to them, or make the adjustments on that to make sure that it's right, it's correct. And the second part of the communication piece is don't talk, listen. Yeah, don't talk, listen. And what I've also said is that one of my favorite books is How to Win Friends, Influence People. And people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Part of the leadership piece, which also goes to the example, is to listen. And I mean, really listen. Don't just go, yeah, I got it, but you're going to do it my way. You'll be surprised. It's the communication piece is when you hear communication is 2 ways. It's not one way. That's called a dictatorship. It's not called communication. I hope that helps, because planting the seeds then is also making sure that somebody sees what it means to them and what it means to their involvement, because they're part of it. They're part of it.
When it comes to leadership, can you give, you're welcome to name names, you certainly don't need to, but I'd love to hear an example in real life for you, either past or present, where you have planted seeds, either with an individual or a team, and where that became fruitful? And can you ground that in an example for us?
I have to think about that for a second, but there's one that comes to mind that's not mine. If I really think about leadership, my partners, there's a guy named Howard Sharpman and John Irvin, and two of the people that I have the deepest amount of respect for. And if you ever do due diligence on two excellent human beings and business people, they're them. There was a scenario in our company that when we talk about people matter and we want to pay attention to the team that we have, a lot of companies say most important asset is our people. The reality is they look at it as an expense and people are disposable, because you hear, if they don't change, we change them. That's the old mantra of the business.
Yeah.
And there was a scenario in our company where the communication was people matter, our teammates matter. And we had a scenario early on in our business where one of the people that were part of our team had a significant issue, life-changing issue. Some self-induced, some people's just from an addiction standpoint. And the way that John and Howard handled that was unbelievable. And what it meant was that it combined all three of those principles in one. How they were attentive to the person's care, and how they were literally saying, we're going to take this person and help this person get through these steps of recovery. And we're going to pay for it. And we're going to stand behind the person. And sometimes when you start to think about that from a leadership standpoint, the example, first off, the communication of this is what we believe, and we're going to now show it, and we're going to plant that seed. The second was that we're going to show the example of what it means to be a leader, even in the hard times, on that one principle. And then the third one is they connected steps, real steps, for that person to have recovery, and that person has. And what that did early on in our company is it set a culture that there was no such thing as ego. It was literally all about making sure that we hit the mission, we drove to the mission, and we provided it. We became a person of influence to people that mattered in our life. So that's the part of leadership that I think that stands out most to me, because as a person who have been in a couple companies, have been in a couple cultures, even in a couple countries, that what they said and what they did, sometimes two different things.
Yeah.
So hopefully that gives you a good example of what I mean.
Great example. I felt that as you were describing it. I think that's a great example of really the message around caring for people and setting that example, planting seeds, and then ultimately creating connectivity on the back end of it. I'm curious for you to speak to, and I'm going to frame it up for a minute, but the importance of culture when it comes to a team. We had a podcast that came out a few weeks ago from Cameron Herold, who wrote several books, including Vivid Vision that he wrote. And he actually described culture. There's a root word in that, which is cult, and to create a following within the culture. And how they went about doing that, he's a former CFO of Got Junk before they sold, and how they developed this following in a culture of Got Junk. And I'm curious, you being as experienced as you are in team building, how you use culture and create a following that's magnetic to your business.
Yeah, man, what a great question. There's a book, and I was making sure that I had the right title, because I wrote down a couple of things that I thought were going to probably come up. And one of them is, where did you get that culture piece? Yep. And there was a book by Trevor Moab. It's called It Takes What It Takes. And I remember reading that book, and it was about when you make a decision to go do something, it means that you automatically eliminate choices. And the one thing, if there's a couple sayings that I'd like to introduce into this, and the first one is win the day. And I'll talk about that a little bit later if we have a chance. The second one, which is pertinent to this subject, is the magnet. You are a magnet. It's not what you attract only, it's what you repel. And so when you start looking about culture, you have to magnetize your business. And I always talk about magnet, and I use my hands because it needs to symbolize. Magnet is two sides. It's what you attract and what you say, I cannot allow that in my system. And part of the great cultures is not necessarily defining what it is. It defines what it will not accept. And so that is a big, but sometimes, you get too caught up in well, what could it be? And you get all these big dreams, and then suddenly it starts to be this way, really wide, versus what won't you accept? And you can pretty much name 4 or 5 things. We will not accept this. And once you establish that, you now have taken what it takes to win and now started to make choices of what you won't accept. And that becomes the things that you reject. And then as you polarize your magnets, I should say, magnetize your magnet, you'll be surprised at what you pull in and what the positives are. And then if it starts to violate those things that are negative, they'll quickly go. And the culture then is formed, it's created, and then other people create synergies of that. And that's how I believe culture is really formed.
Oh man, be as clear about what you're going to repel as it is what you're going to attract.
That's right.
Yep. That's incredibly powerful. I think the classic culture conflict is I've got a high performer who puts up numbers. The guy is a maverick, so he's low on values. Doesn't necessarily jive with the culture. I kind of want to box him up, but he's a high performer, but I don't really want him to spoil other people. Have you had a time in your career where you've had to make a tough decision like that? Because I feel like it's an easy thing theoretically to say, oh yeah, protect your culture, get rid of the guy. Culture is more important than performance. Like, okay, got it. Like, what about when the rubber hits a road and you have a tough decision to make? How do you filter through that?
Yeah, and that is part of the art of leadership. It's not a science, it's an art. The one thing that always comes to my mind, and I have several examples I could give you, and I won't mention the names, but I could, of the scenarios that decision came up with. I think the most important part is, you got to look at the producer or the high performer and say, what direction are they going in? And if they're going down a direction and you can't change that direction, and they're not willing to humble themselves and turn from that, whatever it is, that bad behavior. But if they're so ingrained in that bad behavior and they won't turn, you really can't save them. It's really, they are actually ultimately killing themselves in the business or the opportunity. I realize that money matters and revenue matters. And if they're a high performer bringing a lot of money, it may be the worst and the toughest decision that you could make and the worst decision financially. But if you start to look at what that says to everybody else in the organization, you'll be surprised that everybody will realize that was a very hard decision and you made it. And that means if you made it, you're willing to make all the tough decisions. Now I'm paying more attention. Now I'm listening. Now I'm following. It's more than just, oh, that's too bad for that guy. It really knows that you really know that it affects and influences you. And that the one last part I'll also say is this, is you have to take the decision to an extreme to make the decision. So for example, we had a couple of times that there was a very high performer, was doing some things, fudging on some financial things. And I made the comment, and it was $500, $600, $800. And then we done a little did more digging. They started, it was another $800, $10, $800, $1,000 here. And little stuff. I mean, got multi-million-dollar principal. Then you start thinking, well, why is he trying to penny pinch the company? And why is he trying to steal from them? So you got to take it to an extreme. If he robbed a bank, would you fire him? And the answer is yes. Well, then if he's doing this once, change the direction. He did it again. Now I can't change the direction. He's already chose that direction. I have to make a decision. This is the way we're going to make the decision on this principle. And from that perspective, that's how you save the culture. That's how you preserve the culture. Because this is what we won't tolerate. And this is what we are shooting for and striving for.
So Bill, first off, as a guest, you get 10 points. Because you brought up a book that Rich didn't just reach behind and go, oh, I have this one right here. I don't. And so Rich is going to get an Amazon box late next week.
I already bought it.
Because that's what Rich does. And I tell you, like back in the early 2000s, I think, I don't know, I can't speak for both of you, but I read more books in that period than I ever have since. Because we were so ingrained in all these different messages of, how to win friends and influence people, to Millionaire Mind, to Millionaire Next Door, to like whatever, right? All these different books. And the fact you brought up a book that Rich doesn't have is fantastic. That gives me great pleasure. But anyway,
made my day.
what you're also talking about, and it seems to be the theme of this conversation, what you just talked about there in that example of making that tough decision, taking it to an extreme and making it, was, again, leadership. It was planting seeds. That action you took as an entrepreneur planted seeds with everybody else to go, okay, this is the culture. So all these things kind of play into each other, right? The leadership will dictate the culture. And I absolutely love what you talked about when you say, listen, a magnet isn't just what comes together, it's what also you're going to repel. And it only takes a few bad decisions of bringing the wrong pieces into your company to destroy everything. I've lived through that. So I appreciate you sharing that, and really good examples as well. I want to bring you back to win the day, because you quickly went over win the day, and then we went right down to magnet. Bring us back to win the day. And I must note, for those listening to the podcast and not watching the podcast on YouTube, you got a weekly schedule behind you as a large poster that says Monday, hustle, Tuesday, hustle, Wednesday, hustle. Great calendar, very easy to manage. You know what you need to do today.
That's
hustle.
right.
Is that what win the day is about, or tell us more about win the day?
Yeah. So win the day is there's two main parts of win the day. The first one is what I call self-order. And many people do not have self-order. They don't start thinking about what's important to them as a person and what's important to their principles and foundation. By the way, it took me a long time. When you and I met each other, I was still part of forming who Bill Pienias is.
Yeah.
And what am I all about? And sometimes you're trying to feel and figure out what are the real principles in life that I need to hammer down and do it. That's where self-order comes in. The second part of win the day is what's the most important one or two things that need to be done in the day. And everybody, when I say win the day, everybody likes to win. But what it takes to win is typically two major things: focus and effort. Focus and effort. And most people lose the day in focus. This damn thing right here is called your smartphone, makes you stupid. It just really does, because it distracts you all the time. Matter of fact, the reason why they put these notifications on is to distract you from where you're at, so you bring your attention to this.
Yeah.
So if you're going to win the day, it's to get focused on that one or two things that are most important for the day. And I will tell you, this today was for me one of the most important things, because one, I love you guys. I've known you I'll call you since you're babes, but the reality is our relationship, even though it started 22 years ago, it's never ended. It's continued to grow, and this is the next steps up. So I'm taking this very seriously, and of your listeners too. That's part of winning the day. The second part of winning the day, of the accomplishment of it, once you start to keep those little, I'll call them agreements to yourself, those little commitments to yourself of getting those one and two things done, that's winning the day. And what it does is it instantly brings confidence to you to go achieve the next day and the next day and the next day. And one last part about win the day is, and I say it all the time, I could probably do a full hour training on what it means to win the day in your scheduling. But at the end of the day, you have to look back and reflect. And many people don't win the day. And if I can say one last thing is part of you establishing yourself to be a CEO is I have a 4 very simple step process. It's your goals, your forecast, your strategies, and your adjustments. So part of the win the day is you set a goal. What are the 1 or 2 things to go get to that need to be done? Your forecast is, when are you going to go do it? How are you going to do it? Your strategies are what are the things, behaviors that you need to do to accomplish it? And if you did or didn't, you got to look at it and go, okay, what do I need to do tomorrow to change that, to make it better? Winning the day is part of I'll call it your leadership muscle that you can work out every single day to increase your leadership resolve, your leadership skill set, and most importantly, your leadership influence. And that's what win the day means.
Yeah, that is so awesome. And I love, self-order. And then really the one thing, we talked about the one thing concept on this podcast a bunch of times. I've been really using it as my methodology this year. Like, what's the one thing I'm going to do today to help me win this week, this month, this year, right? And bring it all back. So love the leadership muscle building. And I want to maybe come back, and Rich, certainly feel free to come back here too if you want. But I want to just jump back to one other topic that hit, something for me. It was a mixture between you talking about this blank piece of paper, right? You were in a corporate environment. You grabbed you wanted to do a restart. You grabbed the blank sheet of paper. And now you end up here where the Venn diagram, like Rich talked about earlier, is like you found it. Like somehow that came together. Talk to us, talk to us about that experience, because a lot of times I had the same experience, but in 2019, took a sabbatical and I took a blank sheet of paper almost every day. Like, where am I going? What's going on? And purpose and everything else. How important was that for you, both as an entrepreneur, as a CEO of your family that you talked about, to really directionally align your restart?
Yeah, that is it was a process, and when you say, you pull out a piece of paper and everybody says, "Oh, I'll just do the Benjamin Franklin T thing," and it's much more than that. And to your point, you mentioned there's what's the one thing that helps me accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish, and I realized when you do get that blank sheet of paper, it's never one thing. It's usually a combination. It's two or three things added together that unlocks the thing. And it started, if I can just maybe regress to a small story.
Yeah.
I was in AEGON and I was working with a company, and in that scenario, my job got switched with another person, and I went from literally, I had literally almost 100 people that were reporting to me, and basically like the chief marketing officer of the organization, and I got moved over to be an executive vice president person. And I was working with a guy named Ed Milet, which you may know.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to one of my mentors, and he said to me, "So did they give you your job description?" I said, "No." And he said, and I was literally thinking like this was kind of almost like a demotion. Like I was now going to be more of a secretary than I was going to be a business leader. And he made a comment. He said, my mentor said, "If you were to write your job description, what would you write?" And I had to stop for a second at that time. I was 32 years old, 31 years old. And I started thinking, what the hell would I do? What would be the optimal job for me to add most value to Ed and to this division? And what ended up happening is I wrote that business job description. My business acumen started to increase. My business skill sets started to be exposed of the gaps that I had. And all of a sudden, I started to go to work on those. I didn't go to work on the job. I went on to work on the skill set to support the job. And what ultimately happened, and what has now happened in my life, is that I wanted to put down what are the things that I wanted, and what are the things that I didn't want, and where were my skill sets best suited, and what are the things that I have the most fun doing. And so when Rich was describing the visual of what I wanted those three things in my life. I wanted to be able to help people become financially fit. I wanted to help people become physically fit, and I wanted them to have the lifestyle that they wanted, but not just to say, "Hey, we're going to have fun. We're going to go to the beach. We're going to drink beers." And no. If you really want to have a lifestyle you wanted, some people are saying, "Damn it, I want to be the CEO of my life. I need to get it under control. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great spouse. I want to be a great father." It's all connected. How do I do that? I was thinking, damn, now we're talking. Now we're talking. That's the stuff that creates life change. And that was what created on that pad of paper, that blank sheet, is when I started to write that. And I said, when I die, what would it look like if I really did all the things that I really wanted to, that were really passionate to me? And that was what happened. That's exactly. And by the way, one last thing is self-order is reflection. If you don't reflect on what happened, you are destined to repeat what happened.
Yep.
Bill, one of the things I learned from you over 20 years ago in building rapport was if you look on somebody's walls, those are things of long-term interest to them. And if you look on their countertops or desk, those are things of at least short-term interest to them. And I look over your shoulder, and for those that are listening on Spotify or on Apple and not on YouTube, Bill over his left shoulder has a picture of a lion that says, "Once you become fearless, life becomes limitless." So based on a lesson you taught me over 20 years ago, I've got to check in with you and say, why did you pick that picture? And why did you pick those words? And what does that mean to you?
There was a thing that part of being and growing up in my life was that you need to get a check on you of who do you really want to be. You can't be just I call it divided person. You can't be one person at business and one person in your personal life. You can't be one person to this type of people and one person. You have to be one person. And what ends up really creating fear in people is, are you really going to get to know me? And then are you going to like me? And what I found out is that everything is 50-50. 50% of people don't like you, and 50% of people do like you. So if you're trying to be liked by everybody, you become a nobody. And so part of this fearless piece is, don't be afraid to be who you are. And if you make a mistake, own it and then make an adjustment. It goes back to that philosophy of make the adjustment. See, some people think they got to live in perfect, and that's not the case. And so when I actually come into this office and I look at those two things all the time, because at the end of the day, I need to win the day. And win the day means it's going to take effort. It's going to take focus. And if I'm afraid to do the job, or if I'm afraid to be Bill Pienias, or if I'm afraid to plant the seed, which may be a tough seed to plant, then I become limited by my self-restrictions. And what I've also found is that when you do live without fear of doing what's right, or what you think is right, not for power and ego, but you do the things that you think is right, you will be surprised at how that magnet starts to bring these things in your life that you never believed could happen to you. And I'll just tell you real quickly, my wife and I, we both turned 50 within 9 months of each other last year. And we were going to go to Paris last year. And we never believed that we would be able to take these type of trips and have some of the wealth and money and opportunities that we have today. But it goes back to that part. And we're leaving on Monday to go to Paris for 8 days to do what I call the trifecta, to celebrate her 50th, my 50th, and our 25th 1 year later. So we get a redo by COVID. So we're not.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
On all three of them.
So we're really excited about it. But I want to just add one last part. The lion is a key piece to this, because the lion has a roar, which creates fear, but it also is very distinctive. And the lion, though, backs it up, because if you come by it, it's gonna knock you on your socks, and it may even take your life. That's your actions and your principles. That by you acting those out, it's like a roar into society. It's a roar into your business. It's a roar into your family life, that they will pay attention. And if you back it up like the lion does in its actions, you'll be amazed. I've been amazed of the life change that's happened inside for my family, my wife, my kids, my business, the relationships that we've built here in our company, and the relationships that we built with our customers. So I appreciate you asking, because that means a lot to me.
Yeah, that's powerful. I see why you hung it behind you. We've talked a bit about win the day. The picture behind you talks about life being limitless. And the other point that I want to bring in is, early on when we just started the podcast, you talked about that you like to compete and win. And I think about, life being limitless and winning the day. And I'd love to hear your perspective on competition and winning, and who are you competing against exactly, and what does a win look like?
Yeah, boy, you always ask those type of questions. I love it. I love it. There's do you know the boxing coach Tony Atlas? Have you ever heard him?
I don't think so.
He's trained Muhammad Ali, and he's trained some of the greatest fighters in the world. And when you I would recommend that you Google his speech about the difference between surviving and winning. And what is amazing is, in our life, even in our body, your body is built to survive. So, like, for example, if you have a hurt, a pain, like, you're pain in your back, you don't do certain things. Your body's saying, whoa, don't do it. And then why I like to lift weights is because you're inflicting pain on your body that's not going to kill you, but your body instantly says, you're tired, it hurts, stop. When the reality is it's not. And that's the survival mode that kicks in. So part of being a champion and winning the day, for me, starts with, can I get out of survival mode and start to get to be a champion? Which means that I now control the way I feel and what will limit me or not limit me based on my thoughts and ideas. The second part of win the day comes to, can I get the things accomplished that I can get accomplished? Because part of winning is being a champion. And not everybody can be number one. but everybody can win and win the day. They can beat their addiction. They could beat their laziness. So people are addicted to laziness and procrastination. You can beat that and you can win the day. That changes things. It also goes even to the client perspective. If you're an entrepreneur of, I don't like making cold calls, or I don't like making a phone call to a new prospect. Well, that is a fear that's limiting you, and it's not going to hurt you. But survival mode means I don't want to have somebody say no. Well, the reality is they already did say no. You just got to call them to confirm it. And most of the time, they really do need to hear your story. So winning the day for me is about those types of things. And then when I say win the day, as you can tell, I get excited about this one subject because it's the subject that I believe changes people's hearts and character, to let them know that they are better than what they're doing if they allow themselves to think like a champion, not like a survivor. And that, in essence, is win the day.
Thank you. The competing part, a thread that I picked up on from you there is that competing against your own mindset when you want to give up, when you want to have resistance and pushing through that? Or where does a competition part come from inside you as it relates to business?
Yeah, and it's competitions for people. It could be a number of things. It could be competing against themselves. It could be competing against somebody else. And I'll just make this one broad statement is competition brings out the character of you. It brings out who you are and what you're all about. Because if you're willing to work hard, you'll put in the effort. If you're willing to stretch yourself past what you believe are your limits, you can be a champion. You will compete. That's what brings the best out of us. But for me, competition is actually twofold. One is I got to compete self-order. I got to compete against me because I know what I'm limiting myself. It's the being reflective on those things that prevent me from being who I could be. But the second is, if you're not measuring yourself at some point to somebody else in the marketplace, you're never going to know whether you're gaining ground or losing ground. And in order for you to grow a business, you start with yourself to grow the numbers of what can you grow based on what you said you're going to do. That's your forecast. But in the marketplace, you might have opportunities that if you worked a little bit harder or you changed one little strategy, you could get more market share. That is part of the competition. So you have to pay attention, because in the business world, competition is sometimes trying to kill you. It's not trying to beat you. It's trying to kill you. So that's where your competitive spirit as a business person is about being a champion. And I will tell you, being on the attack all the time isn't always the best thing, but thinking about how do you attack matters. And one last thing I'll leave for your listeners and you is, sometimes people always ask the question, why does this happen? Or why did that happen? But they don't ask the next question of how. How do I beat that? How do I change that? How do I fix that? How do I do this? And when you stay on the why, all you do is have all the reasons why it happened.
Yep.
But when you go ask it how, it changes your behavior, which is the adjustments that need to be made for you to win.
Yeah. I love that. If we just change the first word in our sentence, it changes the entire mindset. If you ask why, you get justifying reasons of the past and you're mired in the past. If you just change that first word to how, now all of a sudden there are limitless possibilities and you're talking about the future. That is so key. Thank you for that.
No, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you guys are talking about, winning the day, winning in general, and I relate that back to financial, health, and lifestyle, which is really what your business is focused on. And you talked a little bit about perspective. One of the things I found to be a key factor in my life is to always have perspective, because when your things are bad, they're probably not as bad as some other people's.
That's right.
And, when you think about winning in these areas, the competition is really yourself. It's life. Like, can you beat yourself against procrastination, laziness, taking the easy road, stopping at your 8th rep when you could have went to 10 because your mind gave up on you? That's the competition.
That's right.
Right? Because winning is a matter of perspective. You can earn more money. There's always somebody who's going to make more money than you. You can be as healthy as you want to be. There's someone that's more healthier than you. You can have a great lifestyle, but it's your perspective and how you get there that I love what you do and your business does. So if we boil this all the way down, Bill, just to like one final question, and I want to keep it right in financial health or lifestyle, right where your business is. What is the biggest thing that, in your experience, when you've met people over the years, that you think have maybe not wrong, but are have the wrong perspective as it relates to financial health and lifestyle? And then conversely, on the complete other side, what is the one main thread you see in people that have strong financial health and lifestyle that exists there? What are those two yin and yangs?
Yeah, so great question. I think that the perspective of what helps people become financially fit and physically fit is these two main pieces. The first one is you don't need to save hundreds and thousands of dollars. You need to save a car payment. If you save a car payment towards your financial future, you have a much better chance of having retirement savings for your future. You don't, and some people say, well, what's a car payment? Well, you could save a Hyundai car payment, $300-400, or you can save a Mercedes Land Rover, $1,200-1,500 a month. It's your lifestyle, but you have to do that. It's a discipline. If you don't do it, you're not going to have a future. It's real simple. It's not a maybe so. No, you are not, and we know it. If you look at the statistics, the people that don't save are dead broke when they retire, or when they go to retire at retirement age, and they can't. They got to keep working. They got to keep struggling. So that's one of the pieces. The second one is that when people talk about being healthy or fit, they think of the bodybuilder, professional athlete. Yep. And totally incorrect. What we mean by healthy and fit is that we want you to be able to stand up without having backaches. We want you to be able to get on the ground and play with your grandkids when you're 50, 60 years old. We want you to be able to walk up the stairs and not be out of breath. It's not about being a superior athlete. It's about being able to move your body and to have the cardio and strength to do the things that you want to do every day. And those two things combined is what I believe makes our company special, but it's what really people are looking for. And the most important part is the process to do it. And so part of the process is to do it consistently. And so you've asked, like, what are the things that I've seen really high performers or even good performers do? Yeah. Is that they do things consistently. It's not going to the gym. Most people make this mistake when they work out. They haven't worked out at all. And the first thing they do is they say, all right, I'm going to go to the gym. And they go to the gym and they work out for an hour and a half. And they literally like blow up their body. And then in the next day, they can't move because their body was like, what the hell did you just do? You nuked me. You nuked me. I'm done. Yeah. And now all of a sudden your workout intentions went from, I'm going to do it, I'm going to put in all the energy to it, to now my body hurts way too much. I'm never doing that again. Yeah. And so some of those things are important. I'll give you two real simple examples. Some people say, well, how do I start? This is the first thing. You want to just work on some mobility and balance. Brush your teeth and stand on one leg while you're brushing your teeth. Believe it or not, it changes the stability. Just try it and then switch it. Switch your legs. The second, when people say, well, I'm not a workout guy. I'm not a person who goes into the gym. Go for a walk for 20 minutes. Just do it. Just go for a walk. And if you break a sweat, it means you're really out of shape. But if you don't break a sweat, at least now you walk these steps. Those simple, small behaviors on a consistent basis. So if you start walking every day, or we know that hopefully you're brushing your teeth every day, you'll be surprised that now your balance, your mobility drastically increases just by that one simple little action.
Yeah. Well, the summary of the answer, I think, right, is the people who aren't doing so well financially or physically versus the people that are doing well financially or physically are those who do things consistently and those who don't.
That's exactly right.
And that's a huge message, which kind of brings me back to habits. Like, how long does it take to form a habit? I mean, when you work with your individuals there within your organization or people that you work with, what is consistently? What do I need? 20 minutes a day walking. Well, how long do I need to do that for it to form a habit? Or saving a car payment. How long do I need to do that before it becomes a habit? Like, what is the routine or habit length period that you guys look at?
So that's an interesting comment. There was a book that was called Atomic Habits, and everybody talks about it. And Atomic Habits really means that it's something that you're going to do as your identity. And so I said to myself, I want to be a fit person. I don't know if I want to go to the gym every day, but what I could make a commitment to is getting up early with my wife and going for a walk. Mm-hmm. And what it did two things is, one is I now talk to my wife way more than I used to. because we have 20, 30 minutes where we go on a walk and it's just us. The second part of that is I do it all the time, every day, so that now I feel better. And what's interesting about the habit piece is if you're looking for just the result, once you hit the result, it's a location.
Yep.
Then the journey's over for you. And then guess what? You go right back to where you were before. So I don't know what my optimal location is in terms of my health, but I do know that there's a parameter I want to stay at, what weight I want to be, how do I want to move, and how I want to look. Yep. And so to your point, I think it takes typically 3 weeks of consistency to create a habit, but it may take more to change the identity of, oh, I'm fat and I need to lose weight, so I'm doing this. Or I'm out of shape, I need to do this to get in shape. But then once you get in shape, your identity goes back to, you know what, I really am out of shape.
Yeah.
And that's just how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Rich, do you have the book Atomic Habits?
I don't. He's
10 points, Bill Pienias. Bill, you have won the day, Bill. 20 points to you.
I won the day.
You won the day. This has been such a joy. I know, certainly for Rich and I to have you on the podcast and reconnect. And hopefully we can come visit your brewery, the Crooked Thumb Brewery in Tampa, sometime soon, and reminisce about old times and learn about all the new books that you've read that we haven't gotten to yet. So really appreciate your time here today.
Bill, thanks for coming on. It was great to see you. It was great to be inspired by you again. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. Fellas, we'll see you soon.
Stick around with Rich and I for a few more minutes while we break down the podcast.
What an incredible time to reconnect. That was fun. Not that I haven't had fun on our other podcasts, but that was fun. I haven't seen or talked to Bill in like 19 years. And the way that he communicates with stories, but being poignant and building things out, it's one of the things I've always admired about him is his ability to communicate well and inspire people. And I felt inspired on this podcast.
Yeah, no doubt, Rich. I would say that, I don't know for you, but I think Bill definitely had one of the most, if not the most biggest impact on my speaking, storytelling, just the way to really present yourself. I think he taught us a lot. We were straight out of college, and seeing somebody like Bill, who's a couple of years older than us, talk in front of large groups and really, to your point, motivate and inspire. And I do remember, like, he had and he continues to be a student of the game. He wants to win the game, but he's a student of the game. Like, he studies leadership, he studies what's going on, he studies himself introspectively. Like, I really love that whole, he wants to win the game, he wants to win every day, but he then goes back to the film room and studies too.
Yeah. And he talks about that with retrospectives even daily.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes, even myself, like I want to win the day, I'll go win the game, I'll do that. But am I continuing to sharpen the saw and study and learn? And like that's a huge, like, that's something I'm coming out of today going, man, we got some books to read, Rich. We're behind.
A few things I've got highlighted in my notes that really resonated with me. When it comes to culture, getting clear about what you're going to repel, not just what you're going to attract. I thought that was important. And then I asked that follow-up question with him on if you have a performer, but not really a culture fit, how do you wrestle with that? I love where he went, which is if you take that behavior of the person who's not a culture fit to an extreme, you're going to find your values. You're going to find your principle. And the other piece he said is your people are watching. So while you're retaining the person that's not a culture fit, who is a performer, your people are watching. And then if you were to remove them, your people are watching that too. I think that was really, really important, because I think there are a lot of businesses that have high performers with variable or low culture fits.
Well, there was a theme, like a thread, right, through a lot of his messaging. And the thread that I drew a little bit was one of his biggest mentors telling him, don't be in a hurry. And then as he studied leadership, one of the 3 keys on communication is don't throw seeds, plant them. Well, if you're in a hurry, you're going to throw. You plant instead, right? Lead by example. Sometimes that takes a while to lead by example. Sometimes you're not the leader. You got to lead where you are, he talked about, right? And the connectivity, connecting with people takes time. Building relationships takes time. Don't talk too much and listen, takes time. You got to, don't hurry. And then the 3 keys of leadership. And then it took us all the way over to what will you not accept? And what, sometimes, like one of the biggest things, you hear this all the time. What are the core values of the company? Well, are they just posters on the wall? How are you guys exhibiting your values? What do you do as a company to exhibit your values? But what he said, I thought, was a very big key. It's not just what do we do to exhibit our values within the organization. It's what we don't do. It's what we repel. It's what we will not accept. Because by you not accepting things or repelling things, you are therefore identifying what your culture is going to be, what your values are, the reverse way.
As you're speaking, I got a flashback to Randy Soma, former person on the podcast who talked about in the boardroom where you have your very values hanging and decisions being made that may be in contradiction with those. You talked about a thread that you saw from Bill. Another thread that I saw was, I wasn't making tally marks, but how many times did he say principles, values, being who you are in that? The lion roaring. And when the lion roars, you being the lion, that is taking action on your principles. Like, he is so centered on his own clarity around principles and values. I wish we would have asked him. I bet he would have had a list of 5 or whatever it was. Like, what are the values? What are the principles that you're guiding? And he talked about one life. There's not a personal life and a business life. Like, what are the, I'd love to have him on as a repeat guest, maybe on the podcast, and dig in to that. I'd love to dig into, we talked about moving and eliminating the ego, moving that aside. We didn't dig into that. There's so many things that we could have chased down in this. I'd love to have him on the podcast again at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned it as well. Like, Bill is a perfect example of someone who's the CEO of his life, as well as the CEO of his business. And he is still the same person in both environments, right? So I really love that. And what he's done by that Venn diagram you described, I talk about this, I think very early in one of our podcasts, that, I found that through some other Venn diagram, that success is what you can be the most passionate at. You can drive your economic engine, right? And you can be the best in the world at it. And this is where Bill lives, really, in this area. And it strikes me, when he was talking about this Tony Atlas boxing coach, and I got to go watch this speech. So as part of one of the takeaways, if you can do the same, I'd love to go just watch this and YouTube it afterwards. Surviving versus winning. Here's the deal, Rich. Way too many people are surviving. Way too many companies are surviving. Way too many entrepreneurs are surviving to get to the next day, right? For whatever reason. Changing that to how do I win versus how do I survive, that's tough. That's a real tough thing to do. And the world needs more mentors than people that are pushing the how do you win versus survive mentality. And entrepreneurs need that. Entrepreneurs need that messaging as well. And how he can help businesses, how you and I can help businesses or entrepreneurs win versus survive. The more people we get on that mission, the better.
In the back end of that message on what winning is, it doesn't need to be, if you're looking to get fit, being a bodybuilder, stand on one leg and brush your teeth. I've never heard of that before. So in addition to a couple of books we got to read, we have to watch a Tony Atlas video, and we now have to brush our teeth on one foot. I thought that was a fabulous podcast.
Absolutely.